Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to our fourth in a series of conversations organized by the Valkyrie Partnership, Open Society University Network, Bard College, and the Telwar Network. My name is Erin Canaan, and I'm the Dean for Civic Engagement and the Vice President for Student Affairs at Bard College. Joining me today as moderator is a friend and colleague, Manuela Roosevelt, who's the chair of the Valkyrie Partnership, which is a friends group of the National Park Service that preserves Eleanor Roosevelt's home and legacy at Valkyrie in Hyde Park, New York, and I am the secretary on that board. Eleanor grew up living about 4 miles from Bard's New York campus in Tivoli, and her home, which is now that national park, is located about 20 minutes from here. Eleanor is everywhere in the Hudson Valley, and it is my pleasure to be one of the many partnerships to amplify her legacy today. Manuela and I have been reflecting on Eleanor's written work over the past few months, and so much reads as contemporary for today. She was a prolific writer, and she spent much of her later years writing directly to young people in books like Tomorrow Is Now, which is the title of our series. She believed in intergenerational learning, involving young people actively in the democratic process, and listening to and amplifying the voices of those whose voices were not represented at her time or were being actively suppressed. Our series is meant to reach across generations and connect that voice, Eleanor's voice, to contemporary thinkers and leaders and to young people. We can all find comfort in wisdom in her voice and perhaps find our own voice along the way. About our other sponsors today, the Open Society University Network is a partnership between Bard College, Central European University, and the Open Society Network, developing academic programs supporting student and institutional civic engagement across geographic and demographic boundaries. The Telwar Network is an international association of higher education institutions committed to strengthening the civic roles and social responsibilities of institutions around the globe. Let me introduce Manuela now. Manuela Roosevelt is the chair, as I said, of the Eleanor Roosevelt Valkyrie Partnership, a private nonprofit that works in tandem with the National Park Service for the enhancement of visitors' experiences at the home of Eleanor Roosevelt. The organization funds educational programs, lectures, and has raised more than $2.5 million for the Park Service to assist in restoration projects on site at Eleanor's home. She is the editorial director at Callaway Arts and Entertainment, a publisher and cross-platform media company in New York City. And she lives with her family at Springwood, the estate where Franklin was born and now belongs to the Park Service as well. So I'm going to turn the mic over to Manuela.
Thank you, Erin, and a warm welcome to all of you who are attending the webinar live, and of course, deep gratefulness to Bard College, the Open Society Universities Network, and the Telwar Network for hosting our series, Tomorrow Is Now. We are here in New York, in upstate New York, and our very honored guest is beaming from Los Angeles, and her team is also joining, although you won't be able to see the team, but we have a bi-coastal presence today. And I know you're joining from all corners of the US and other parts of the world as well. So this seminar series is called Tomorrow Is Now. Tomorrow Is Now is the title of the last book that Eleanor Roosevelt wrote. She wrote 30 books, and Tomorrow Is Now was written at a time literally when she was dying. It was dictated from her bed, and she knew she had very few months left, and she was adamant about writing the book. It is a call to action for the next generation. It is essentially, the title encapsulates the call to action. Let's do everything in our power today for a better tomorrow. And the tomorrow is born right now, right here. We're very honored to be sharing an hour now with Kathy Eldon. Kathy is a friend, but above all, she's an extraordinary individual that will inspire you as you hear her speak very, very much. She is the founder and CEO of Creative Visions. And Creative Visions is a nonprofit in Malibu, in Los Angeles. And Kathy has been a teacher, a journalist. She's an author. She's a film and television producer. She has worked in England, Africa, and now the United States. In 1998, she launched Creative Visions, and very much inspired by the life of her son, Dan Eldon. Creative Visions helps young people to create social action programming and messaging through all kinds of media platforms. It is, I think, a unique nonprofit, and it has helped so many people find their voices and promote visions for human rights and social justice causes all over the world. So welcome, Kathy. We're so thrilled to have you here, and I know everybody will be transformed by this hour with you.
Oh, thank you for giving me this opportunity, Manuel. I'm so delighted to be here and with Bard College and the Open Society backing. It's an incredible honor. Thank you.
So Kathy and her team have prepared a visual presentation that we're now going to see, and we'll hear Kathy in the background telling the story of Creative Visions and her story and what Creative Visions is all about.
Thank you. And I actually feel that I wanted to launch with this presentation because I know you're going to be asking me questions later. So I wanted to give you more fodder for your questions, but we're going to gallop through this. I've been given 8 minutes. I've got a stopwatch, so I'm moving quickly through this. Okay. So we're going to move right through this one. And thank you, Alicia. I'm going to talk today about sparks, and it's awkward because I live in California and we've been having these horrible fires. But today we're talking about the sparks that mobilize us, motivate us, ignite our passion, and get us off our backsides. I am including doodles, I call them, that I have done it over the years. I did this one when I was a very young woman, sort of perched on the edge of life. And I know that you're perched on the edge of a rather uncertain life. Mine was uncertain, but for different reasons. So I call this the Red Lady, and she's ready to rock. I went to Wellesley College and I wanted to change the world. And so I married my prince, this Englishman. I was 23 years old and moved to London to a castle. And the castle actually turned out, well, yeah, I forgot to tell you, I moved from Cedar Rapids, Iowa. So the castle turned out to be not exactly what I was expecting. It was a sort of dingy place in the suburbs and actually made me really incredibly miserable. The good news was that I produced 2 children rather quickly, rather early on. Dan, who was 4 years younger than his baby sister, Amy. But I found that the walls of my castle just really started to close in. And sorry, I'm working on my technology here. The walls of my castle seem to close in. We're going to change this to, sorry, we're just going to go back. Sorry, guys, we're going to go back to the, yes, there we go. I felt like I was in a cage and I really, really wanted to fly away. I wanted to fly away with the family. But I was very lucky when my husband was transferred to Nairobi, Kenya. And again, I could make a fantastic flight. I could sort of reinvent myself in Kenya. And this was a time of tremendous nation building. I landed in the country as this sort of eager young woman with 2 little kids and plunged in as a young journalist at the English language newspaper, the Nation newspaper. And it was so exciting because I was able to tell stories about nation builders. And they were kind of like, they saw a problem, they figured out a solution, and then they went for it. And they didn't necessarily ask permission. They didn't necessarily get licenses. They just went for it. They were creative, they were active, they were energetic, and they were brave. I told their stories, and my children were very excited by what I was telling. They were growing up in this kind of incredible, rich culture. This is the 2 of them standing on the edge of the Great Rift Valley, which cuts through Kenya. It was a place with 46 different nationalities, with different languages, Asian, Indians, white people, Black people, every variety. And it was the most wonderful kind of way to grow up. I think Dan was fascinated and enthralled by the Maasai culture, by the indigenous people, and actually made friends with the family. We're going to hear about that in a minute. He was deeply inspired by the people he was meeting. And actually, when there were problems that he was encountering, he took that kind of creative activist mentality and put it to work. In this instance, sorry, we'll go back one. Sorry, I was just scratching. In this instance, there was a little girl who needed a heart operation. And so Dan created a project, Restore a Heart. And he had wild parties. He needed to raise $5,000 for the operation. He had wild parties in our basement, we had a sort of hut in the garden. So my advice to all of you is, if you want to do wild parties that your parents approve of, you're all grown up anyway, you just make them for a cause, and then the neighbors can't complain if it's really, really noisy, in our instance. Dan took on a family next, and I told you about the Maasai family. The mother had 7 or 8 children. The father had disappeared. He was an alcoholic. And so Dan decided to try to help her raise money. And you'll see later on, I'm wearing one of the bracelets that the Maasai Mama made. He was able to support the mother's desire to support her children. So it wasn't a handout, it was helping someone else help themselves. He moved on to help an entire refugee camp. So he went from an individual to a family to a refugee camp in Malawi. And he and his friend at the age of 17 had driven down to Malawi, actually to South Africa, in an ancient Land Rover that kept breaking down. And one of the breakdowns was outside of a refugee camp in Malawi. He saw that they desperately needed aid. They needed wells, they needed blankets. So he mobilized 15 of his friends, and you'll see that the faces. And if you look at the middle column on the right-hand side, you're going to see the name Chris Nolan. And if you think about it, who's Christopher Nolan? He is the director of Batman, just recently Tenet. And Chris was the cameraman on the shoot, if you can believe it. Also on the shoot, the right-hand person in the left column is Jeff Gettleman, who's now the bureau chief for the New York Times in East Asia, so Southeast Asia. So just think about the kind of formative situations that can create that desire in you, to spark a desire to do something really, really great later in life. And actually, tomorrow is now, so actually right now. So Dan went on to actually help a country. And I say that sounds really grandiose, but he was 21 years old, and he heard that there might be a famine in Somalia that was killing thousands and thousands of people. Together with another young friend, Aidan Hartley, they went into Somalia, and Dan took photographs that literally awakened the world. Operation Restore Hope, which saved the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. It was a grand adventure for Dan. He stayed on. He was able to see the people fed. That was him in Baidoa, 6 months after the people had received aid. But it was scary, and the country was deteriorating into a terrible civil war. This photograph I was in New York. I happened to open Newsweek magazine and Time magazine to see his photograph page spread. I called him. I managed to reach him in Nairobi, and I said, Dan, don't you think it's time to leave? Mom, don't ask me to leave. My job is not done. He was due to leave, but he knew he had to finish the job. I said, okay, no matter what, you're living in the life of your choice, and I'm proud of you. Tragically, 2 weeks later, Dan, together with 3 other young men, young photojournalists, 2 African, 2 white, were beaten, stoned, and shot. Died while they were trying to tell the story. There was a terrible bombing by UN forces of a house where they believed a warlord was hiding. The warlord wasn't there. The collateral damage killed off of 80 people and wounded 200. The survivors begged the journalists to come and tell the story. When they got there, the people were so enraged that they killed the journalists. This was Dan's memorial service on the edge of the Ingong Hills, celebration of life. And the young boy was saying, this is to commemorate the sparks Dan lit in others. You can imagine, I know so many of you have been impacted by COVID. You've been impacted by other things. You know about grief. You know about the pain. This was me just not even knowing how to exist even. So again, I moved. I moved from Nairobi to to Los Angeles. Actually, I wasn't living in London at the time. I moved to Los Angeles, determined to make a feature film about the young journalists, about why they did what they did and what it did to them, and about the young activists who went off to on that amazing mission Mozambique. So it was really tough. And again, I was really overtaken by grief, and I was here with my daughter Amy was at Boston University. She called me, just couldn't even function. And I said, I know, Amy, you can make an angel catcher and you can capture the memories of Dan, what his voice sounded like. So she came back from college with a big bulging angel catcher that she had made. We turned it into a book, a journal of loss and remembrance. And that book became the first in a series of four actually angel catcher series. One soul catcher about purpose, another one about bringing more love into your life. And for Amy, she did one for kids, which is quite extraordinary. So I have to tell you that transforming that immense pain, that crippling sorrow into something positive, there was a glimmer of hope in my heart. And even more so, oh yes, oh, I love this. I found this quote. I'm so moved by this. You gain strength, courage, and confidence by every experience in which you stop to look fear in the face. You're able to say to yourself, I lived through this horror. I can take anything else that comes along. And I think my fear was simply that I could not survive. That was the first of a number of creative projects that Amy and I did together. She was 22 when we produced Dying to Tell the Story, an Emmy-nominated film that miraculously, we had a wonderful director. We came in with the idea and were surrounded by the most incredibly talented people. We thought, heck, this is easy. We can make more films. This premiered at the United Nations. But we went on to make more films about the children's peace movement in Colombia. We did a whole series on social entrepreneurs for PBS. We did Extraordinary Moms, which is with Julia Roberts, Hillary Clinton, Rosie O'Donnell, Christiane Amanpour, about the power of mothers to change the world. But we figured out this is the hardest thing we've ever done. So over time, well, first of all, I have to say, it really opened the windows of my soul. And honestly, joy came back in because I was able to be whole. I was able to do what I really loved, create lots of books about Dan's journals. Met Manuela in the process of all of that. She was my biggest cheerleader ever. Thank you very much, Manuela. But the really interesting thing was to create creative visions, which is celebrating the creative activist in each one of us. Every one of us has a creative spark that we can use not only for ourselves, but others. We've now worked with hundreds of, millions, 100 million people probably have been impacted by the projects, not by my projects, but by the projects that we have nurtured through our tremendous network and community. And we'd like to invite all of you to participate. It's free, join in, climb on board. We want you. One of my favorite projects was sparked by Eleanor Roosevelt. And it's really from that statement, where, after all, do universal human rights begin? In small places, close to home. Unless these rights are beginning there, they have little meaning anywhere. So we started Rock Your World. Rock Your World is a human rights base based on Eleanor Roosevelt's Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It's a tremendous program, Rock Your World, rock-your-world.org. You can see that below. And go on it. It's for middle and high school kids. We've got Rock Your Rights for university students, which is getting people mobilized. We've got a home kit. It's amazing. I'm so proud of it. Thank you, Eleanor. That tells a little bit more about it. 25,000 schools. I'll tell you, just for those of you who get annoyed and bored because you're working and something isn't working, this film finally got made. The film I wanted to make back in 1993 when I moved to Los Angeles. It took me 23 years to make the film, but you can see it on Netflix tonight. It stars Ben Schnetzer as Dan. It's directed by a wonderful woman, produced by Kwaku Mandela, Nelson Mandela's grandson, and stars Maria Bello, who flaps her arms around a lot as she plays me. She's over there on the right-hand side. So I hope you enjoy it. Okay, so I think I've squeaked in under the 8 minutes, but just to say, I feel like that person right this minute talking to you. I am excited by who and how you are, wherever you are, about the spark that you contain within. It is impossible times, but it's not impossible because each one of you, there is a glimmer of hope. There is light. We will do this. We will do it together, and we will not give up. We need leadership, hope, inspiration. You are the leaders that we need. So no stepping aside. I absolutely love the next quote of Eleanor. She's great, but I love this quote. The one thing in the world of value is the active soul. And it goes on, free, sovereign, unencumbered. This every man, I say, and every person is entitled to. This every person holds within, but in most it's obstructed and is yet unborn. So the question is, how do we activate, motivate, ignite, set alight that active soul? And I'd like to talk about that now, and just to remind you of the spark that you all hold within. So I am done with that, and now bring it on. Whatever questions you have, Manuela, I'm delighted to answer or try.
Wow. I have heard this story so many times over the last 22 years, and every time you tell it is so inspiring. So thank you, Kathy, for sharing your life and your vision, your heart and your courage with everyone here today. Living the authentic life, right? So living the authentic life is very much something that Eleanor did. She was an activist. She was the only activist first lady of the United States that we know of. And because of her views and activism, social issues, she earned 19 assassination attempts and on her life, and she had the largest FBI file compiled on any American citizen at the time. So courage is dangerous, but it's also the only way to live. And I think Dan Eldon's life proves that, your own life proves that. And it is inspiring to live authentically. It is never monotonous. So what continues to strike me, having been a fan of yours for 20 years, is your passion for human rights and the role young people have in channeling human rights into messaging through all media platforms. And of course, many similarities between your work and that of Eleanor Roosevelt, albeit you're far apart in time. Both you and Eleanor can be defined as activists and disruptors in the challenging and rewarding journey to bring intelligence to the world of the unseen and unheard. Claire Booth Luce said of Eleanor Roosevelt, "No woman has ever so comforted the distressed, or so distressed the comfortable." Was Eleanor Roosevelt ever an inspiration figure in your life?
Oh, such a good question. You know, I grew up in really in sort of in the 50s and 60s when I was really conscious. And I think I, at the time, was not aware of Eleanor, and I really grappled with this. But then I realized that my mother, who was profoundly influenced by Eleanor and definitely talked about Eleanor, was my inspiration. And she lived the life in the suburb, well, not in the suburbs, in a very sort of small Midwestern community, Cedar Rapids, Iowa, which is where I grew up. But she lived that sort of courageous disruptor life in her own way. And I think that Eleanor's inspiration channeled through my mother, who was reading. She joined the United Nations Club. She was reading about issues that mattered. She was speaking up. My family was brave in racial issues in Cedar Rapids in those days. So I like to think that Eleanor's energy, fueled through her writing and fueled through her radio broadcasts, was sparking something in my mother that then sparked something in me. And since then, your wonderful book, Grand-Mère, that you worked on, that probably created my strong interest in Eleanor. And then I've been a voracious devourer of her ever since.
So many of the students who are here with us today will be very deeply inspired by your journey from journalism in Kenya to your activism today and your dedication to young people. What do you tell young people who want to start along your footsteps? Eleanor Roosevelt famously said, "The best way to begin is to begin." So what do you say?
Get off your backside, basically look around you. Honestly, it is impossible to change the world except maybe one person in particular might have changed our world rather radically. But it is really, really hard for just one of us right now here, just by ourselves, to change the world. We can look around. The world around us is infinitely malleable. We can change the world, and look at what you can deal with. For little kids, you know, is there a bully in class? Do you want to bring in something around bullying? Is there a stop sign that needs to be done? I mean, for all of us, just look at what needs to be done. I've got homeless people living on our beach here. You know, what can I do to help the homeless in my area? So please look around you, figure out how you can activate and motivate yourself to do something, and you don't need to do it by yourself. You figure out what the solution is, and then you mobilize people around you. We have online the Dan Eldon Creative Activist Toolkit, and it's really good. Charles Sy did it. You can pull it up, download it, but it takes you through the steps of how do you mobilize people around you. Go on to rock-your-world.org. It's all laid out there, and it's a curriculum. So just don't be overwhelmed. Don't be complacent. Don't be apathetic. Do be that disruptor, that courageous spark. You can do it.
Wonderful. Eleanor Roosevelt highlighted the many ways of making social change in her column, My Day, encouraging ordinary individuals to have faith in their own powers of becoming involved in changing inequality. Is there a common thread that you can discern for the students in our audience, in those individuals who commit themselves to a better tomorrow? What is the common thread? Is it keeping faith despite difficulties? What do you see the common thread is?
I think it is never give up. It's another great person, Winston Churchill. Never give up, never give up, never, 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 or never give in. But it is that tenacity of spirit, of belief, and never losing confidence. And this is honestly one of the hardest things in the world, I think, for us to say, never give up, don't lose courage, you be brave, be a disruptor. You know, you're sitting in your whatever, in your confinement, in our little cells, or I think we're bursting out of them a bit. But how on earth do we remain confident? How do we keep the faith? And I can only say to you, over a lifetime of, and I'll say I can get emotional, of having lost faith in myself, and lost faith in the world, and lost faith in relationships, and lost faith in just the goodness of humanity. You know, we have to hang on to that energy that Eleanor so manifested, and then use the power around you of communication, of one-to-one. Use your social media, use whatever you can to communicate that energy, that positivity, that spirit, which has to be unrelentingly positive. It doesn't help us to go into fear. It's useless unless fear is motivating you, and then it's fine. But just do not lose faith. It's going to be okay. We're going to do this. Damn it.
That leads to my last question of you before we open it up to more questions from the students. One of the last chapters in Tomorrow's Now is titled Getting to Know You. Eleanor encouraged young people to be at home in the world, to learn and understand other people, and to be understood by them. With regard to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the application of human rights, she famously stated, "Where do human rights begin? They begin close to home, in places so small you may not be able to see them on a map." And that's the quote you had earlier in your presentation. Cassie, can you tell us about your work in human rights, and tell us one or two instances where your work has actually changed the local community?
Thank you. I would say I would go back, many, many years to Kenya, for starters. When I was a young journalist in Kenya, and I was so lucky to be doing that. I had absolutely no business doing it. I wasn't trained to be a journalist. And that was the beauty of a place where you didn't require a journalism degree from Columbia to be able to roll up sleeves and do things. But I chose my stories to tell stories about people who I wanted people to get behind, or projects. So I would tell the story, and then there was a measurable outcome. And it was just like with Dan, the measurable outcome of telling a story and then watching something happen. And that is honestly, it's addictive. You know, it's like crack cocaine. You just want to keep doing it. So I know that I was able at that time to make a really a significant difference in the people about whom I was telling stories. There was a dry patch for a long time when I moved to England, and I thought, I'm useless. It's really, really hard. It was my depressed period, and we all go through periods of ups and downs. And I definitely went through a period of deep sadness and questioning my ability. But again, because life is like that, we have our ups and downs, and anyway. Um, I was able later, I think, to be able to really mobilize and foolishly, I mean, just like being concerned, I say foolishly, but you know, as small as being in a condominium collection and realizing that people weren't being kind to each other. And how do you create the energy around kindness, which made everybody want to come together and gather. More recently, I'm very, very grateful that obviously with Creative Visions, my first intern, we call them visionaries, but my first visionary was Jessica Mayberry. She was 23 years old. She wanted to sort of teach people in India, women, how to tell stories. And so we started something called Video Volunteers. She started it, we helped name it. And it is now the largest producer of community-based videos in India. I mean, and the lives that are changed because of Jessica, just like any of you out there. She had an idea, she couldn't do it by herself. She needed help. She mobilized others around her, and she is living in India. She's married to the most wonderful guy. They have 2 kids, but thousands, hundreds of millions of people have been impacted by her. So again, it doesn't have to be your own energy, but who are you inspiring? It's like my mother, she did a lot locally, but she also inspired me, and then I got to inspire other people, and it kind of worked. And right now, just in my own little community, I'm an arts commissioner in Malibu, and I'm really excited because we've had fires, COVID, and we're able to help the artistic community, the artist community. And Malibu is, believe me, it's not, there are some of the rich people, but so much of Malibu is just ordinary people grappling with life just as everybody is. And I'm really pleased just on a local level that I'm able to do that. So, I should do so much more, but that's a little bit.
Thank you, Kathy. And now it's time for questions from our invited audience from all over the world. So the first question is, I would love to hear more about the film, The Journey is the Destination, and how the film has amplified your work.
Oh man, you have a day or two. It was the hardest thing, honestly, that I've done. We started in '93. I moved to LA, and immediately there was tremendous interest. I carried Dan's journals around with me, and we have 20 of these big, fat, amazing journals. Disney, Columbia wanted to do it, all kinds of people, and then the deals would fall apart. I eventually ended up with Lisa Henson, who was wonderful. Lisa, Jim Henson's daughter at Columbia Pictures. She attached Jan Sardi, the person who wrote Shine, which is just a phenomenal film. Do watch it. And then she attached a brilliant woman, Bronwyn Hughes, who was young. She'd just done a film with Spielberg. We had a budget of $39 million, and we were going to make it tomorrow. And I interviewed every single cool young actor at the time. I mean, everybody, Joaquin Phoenix, Christian Bale, you could list the people from that area, and I met them. And then it fell apart. And then Lisa moved on from Columbia, one thing after another. So that's when we made the documentary, but I wasn't going to give up. So for the next 2 decades, I was facing obstacles. And honestly, each obstacle that I ran into, we turned it into something else. Another book. We did 4 books about Dan, more documentaries about other things. But it was a burning desire. I didn't want to make a movie. I wanted to make a movement. I wanted to start a movement. So we finally, with the aid of Kweku Mandela and just wonderful people, managed to cobble together $5 million. That was not $39 million, of $5 million. And I'll say it out loud. Blood, sweat, tears, so many tears. But we did it. We did it in South Africa. Should have been done in Kenya, but Kenyans weren't, they're just not infrastructure ready. And it was the most wonderful experience. It's called The Journey is the Destination. And I'm telling you, if the film had never actually appeared anywhere, it was worth it to me. The lives that I touched, the people that came together. I'm still in daily touch with the crew in South Africa, with the Somalis. There were 400 Somali extras. I'm still in touch with the Somalis. Some of them are in Minnesota now. It's just been a profound experience. I got to hang out with Kweku Mandela, who's a really extraordinary reflection of his grandfather. Did it do what I wanted it to do? No. We premiered at Toronto Film Festival, and there was one bad review, which kind of soured the atmosphere in that film festival. It was really devastating. And think about the power you have. It's a lovely film. It's a beautiful, powerful film. And it made it onto Netflix, and I get daily letters from people who see it. But don't ever, we think that the rainbow, the pot of gold, it is the journey. That is the destination. And you mustn't be discouraged if it doesn't look like you thought it was going to look. And it's following the flow. Go with the flow. Go with the energy. And you may never arrive at Icarus. What is it? Oh, you never may arrive at, what's the name of that? The poem, the Cavafy poem?
Oh, Ulysses, and is it the Ulysses poem from Cavafy?
You may never arrive.
He journeyed for 10 years.
You may never arrive. But what happens along the way is what really matters. And thank you for that question. Whoever asked it, I really appreciate it.
All right, we have many more questions. So let's be, I want everybody to have a chance to hear your answers.
I'll answer briefly.
What's next for you? What is the latest project you're working on? And what's a new update on a previously established projects?
This is fun. It's called OMG WTF, okay? Very rude. OMG WTF, Ohio, Michigan, Florida, OMG, Georgia, Washington, Texas, Florida. So it's a series about the Constitution based on a book by Ben Sheehan. Get it, order it now. It's really, really good. It's cheeky, it's funny, and we're doing a pilot now. We're just raising the final money so we can get it out before the election. And then it will be series on the Constitution. We need to know the Constitution. We don't always understand what is law and what is hyperbole. So do it, check it out.
Wonderful. How can creative life impact political and social movements? What are the best methods to begin doing that?
But by the way, I'm sorry, I want to go back to the last question. I'm also, 2 months ago, I woke up early in the morning with a poem in my head, and it turned into something called Imagination. And I literally had the stanza in my head. And I, since then, have done 20 poems that have poured through me. I don't know where the heck they're coming from. I'm imagining there's some frustrated poet in purgatory who's just channeling them to me, or maybe a rapper caught in mid-verse, but it's extraordinary. And so never give up on your creative spark. You don't know when it's going to burst into flame with something completely different. So I had to throw that one in. So what about, okay.
How does the creative life impact political and social movements?
Let's think about political and social movements. Think about it. What mobilizes them? Often it's music. It's the kind of subversive attitude of artists. In the 60s, we were mobilized by ballads and folk singing and rock stars, and that's, that needs to happen more. I'm puzzled as why there isn't more, but now it's rappers and wonderful people, hip hop artists who are protesting and singing out what they think. We have the ability. It used to be posters. It's now films that mobilize us, but it's really our creativity ourselves. How can you express what you're feeling about what's happening in our world? Blast it out, put it on TikTok, for goodness sakes. I don't care, but don't, and you can be subversive, you can be funny, you can be frivolous about it, but use that spark. It will light fires. It's the only thing that does.
Next question is, how does someone without access gain attention?
What a great question. Well, think about Greta Thunberg. I mean, just think about her. She was 15 years old. Nobody in the world knew who that child was. And she sat outside whatever it was until people noticed her. I don't think many of the great, Richard Branson, he didn't have anything. It was a school dropout. But he mobilized, he figured out what he wanted to do, and he was relentlessly determined. I hear you about access. and I know that we look at privileged people and the children of famous names seem to carry on those famous names, but that's not what it's about. It's about being creative, being determined, being noisy. I love be noisy. I just think that's a great phrase. So be noisy, but with an aim in mind. When we're protesting, it's pro means for, but we're protesting against, but what are we really for, and how do we bring that to other people's attention? Greta, just think about Greta.
Wonderful. What ways can students get involved in creative visions?
Thank you.
Visit the website. Visit the website.
Yeah, absolutely.
Watch the videos.
Yeah, check out Rock Your Rights. That's kid, youth. I say kid. It's youth facing, but it's colleges as well. We're certainly going to be expanding more into college, but check out Rock Your Rights, because that's where we're really mobilizing people. We have take-home kits for parents to work with their children at home under Rock Your World. But it's really, I think if you learn about how to tell stories through Rock Your World, and what stories do you want to tell, and how do you want to mobilize people. But we have a tremendous amount online if you can visit the website. I think that's probably the easiest way. And join the network. Oh my goodness. Thank you, Alicia. Join the network. We go on to Creative Visions. It says, how do you get involved? And it says, join the network. And then you're part of thousands and thousands of people who are activating themselves. They're cross-fertilizing. They're talking to one another, and they're sharing resources. That's the best way for college and beyond.
That's fantastic. The next question, how do you build a network? How did you build the network?
The network, your own network. You figure out what the challenge is. Go check out, download the Creative Activist Toolkit, Dan Eldon's Creative Activist Toolkit, which is on Creative Visions and Rock Your World, but also utilize the tools. It's looking at what the problem is, then mobilizing. Who do you know? One person who you say, hey, will you join me on this? And then that person brings along somebody else and somebody else and somebody else. And then you start allocating jobs. So what's the thing that's no big deal for you? I'm really obsessed with this concept. For you, Manuela, it would be transforming an idea into something printed and in multimedia, because you're a publisher. You know how to do that. So I'd say, Manuela, you're in charge of putting this together in a way that you can share it with people. If somebody's good at social media, that person is in charge of social media. That person is a poster designer. Well, right now we're starting a little coffee shop out in front of our building, and everybody has a different job, but we're working towards a place where we can live stream music and spoken word and comedy. And we're starting as a sort of subversive, it's a coffee shop on a bicycle, but we're really aiming at something very, very cool. But each person is tackling what's no big deal. It's the little NBD. And then we can do the never been done before, capital NBD, never been done before.
We have a lot of questions coming in. This is exciting. You were a young journalist. How did that influence how you tell stories now?
Oh my goodness. I think the main thing was that because I was able to do so many, excuse me, I've got to tell somebody I'm going to be late. Okay. Because I was able to tell so many stories, I learned how to tell a story concisely, how to use words that would get people excited, mobilized. It's practice. It really, I think it was practice. And I was really lucky because you can do this now. So it isn't that you have to be hired by a company. I was always a freelance, by the way. Okay, so it's really practice storytelling. Dive into it and use your social media to tell stories. Again, it doesn't mean you don't have to do the fun, makeup or whatever. Not that you're all hanging out doing makeup stories, but utilize, mingle in what really matters along with things so that it will startle people. You'll be subversive. I'm a big one on being subversive. I like to slip spinach. I made spinach into ice cream. I don't do that, but you know what I'm saying. So just practice storytelling in multiple ways. Right now I'm doing it almost like a rapper. Nobody expects this Nana, I've got 8 grandchildren. Nobody expects me to be a rapper. I think this is really wonderfully subversive. So just practice, don't be daunted, and don't be afraid. You know, fall flat on your face. It's fine. Sorry.
Now, a question for everybody. What has kept you motivated throughout quarantine and these difficult past months?
What has kept me motivated?
Mm-hmm.
The first couple of weeks, I was absolutely paralyzed. I won't say I was paralyzed, I was terrified. I was so worried about, well, certainly health, of course. I have a husband who's immune compromised. I was very concerned about him. I was worried about our organization, how we're going to keep it alive. I was worried about our country. And then it was like, okay, I'm going to have to use that fear, feel the fear and do it anyway. That was a book that really inspired me. How do I take my anxiety and take that energy, just like grieving energy? It's powerful energy, and it can work against you. You can implode, or you can take it outwards and you can use it as fuel that will literally, you know, you could lift cars up if somebody's under it. So I've been using that energy and pouring it into the people around me who are launching projects. We have never been busier. We've never been more activated, and nor has it ever been as exciting as it is now. We're not in the center. Center is just across the alleyway up on the top of a building. We're not there. We have a nursery school there right now, but our team has come together in such an extraordinary way. So for each one of you, if you are feeling, and I think we all are, is that desperate uncertainty and anxiety about what is the world we're going to stumble out into. You know, when I stumble out into the world, I'm not excited about the world, but I'm trying to envision that tomorrow is now. You know, what is it going to look like, and what's my role in creating it?
Wonderful. How do you deal with roadblocks to making changes? How can you not become apathetic?
You know, there's a quote, that which resists persists. So if you're going to bang into it all the time, it's probably going to be there. My device is like, you can charm your way through, you can crawl under. There's a wonderful book by a young friend of mine, which is called The Third Door. I think it's like The Third Door, but it's essentially that there's always a way in. There's the front door, that stops you. There's the back door, but then there might be a window, you know. So, you know, you're going to find obstacles, but if you're really determined, you will either use them as a springboard for something else, and then that springboard may take you a little higher or sideways, and you're going to see a way to get through. Everything happens when the time is right and we're ready. And so it may be that obstacle you're finding is because the time isn't right and you aren't ready, or there is something else that you can do, or, you know, you're going to maneuver your way in. You know, don't be daunted. Figure out what it means, and then, you know, how you're going to get through or what you're going to do instead.
Yeah. Well, Eleanor Roosevelt, I think, regarded obstacles as growth milestones. You know, as the obstacle comes into your life, so you rise to it, and you grow as a human being. How do you feel about journalism today, especially with the fake news and potential bias out there?
That does terrify me. I worry so much about the safety of journalists, and I did a film, Dying to Tell the Story. I've done, you know, scores of conferences about journalists at risk. I don't think that journalism has ever been as greatly at risk as it is now, and it devastates me, because this concept of alternative truth, I mean, alternative facts, I believe this is the actual accurate statement, is ridiculous. You know, there are facts, and then there are interpretation of facts, but the facts are facts. So it's really, how do we communicate, or how do we stay with facts? And even with every news agency being slightly biased, there is no such thing as actual objectivity. But to use alternative facts against human beings so that they're voting for things that really are not good for them is utterly devastating to think of. And I think we as people who are going straight to news sources, you go back to the original source wherever possible, have to stand up, speak out, and register your disapproval in every possible way. We have to vote our way into supporting real facts, science-based, data-based, and really save the future of tomorrow. Now we have to save the future of our tomorrow.
Yeah, very good. Eleanor Roosevelt always felt that if you're going to prepare yourself for an opponent who's going to oppose every view that you present, you have to prepare by putting yourself in their stance and preparing your arguments as seen from what they see in you. And she became, by exercising this way, she became a formidable debater because she had an answer for every opponent. Of course, she had many opponents, but she really became formidable. What is your creative process, and how do you feed the creative process?
Whoa, that's beautiful. Oh my goodness. I think my creative process, that would be labeling something that is very spontaneous in a way. I think so many of, early on, I did 3 social history books when I was 20, in my 20s. And the creative process was, I needed to make money. I wanted to write a book, and somebody said, you can do this. And I got £100 for each book. And I just went out, rolled up sleeves and did it. And that's what we often have to do. You know, that first opportunity that you have to get something out there and be recognized for it. Don't worry about how much you're going to get paid or anything. Just bloody well go out and do it. So that was my creative process back then. And it was scary, and I had no idea what I was doing. Same with the first films I've ever made. You know, the creative process is actually tapping into those who've already gone before and learning as much as you possibly can to fuel whatever idea that you might have. You know, I didn't know how to do, I never known how to do anything in my life. I was educated as an art history major. So it was a very wonderful, eclectic approach to life, but I've never actually known what I'm doing. So I say that to comfort those of you who say, I don't know what I'm doing. I have not a clue. I still don't know what I'm doing, but I braille my way there. Recently, you know, this poetry thing, I wake up, something's there, I snatch it, I work on it. and I guess that's a story of my life. I've worked pretty hard to try to get things out. But I don't know if there's a process. That would be formalize it. I haven't got a clue. I'm really sorry to disappoint you on this question. I have no idea.
Now, something personal. What podcasts do you listen to, and what are your influences?
You know, honestly, this is horrible to say. My entire team sends me podcasts every single day, and I don't listen to them because I'm so busy, honestly, doing what I'm doing, which is maybe 6 meetings a day with other people coming in with ideas and helping those people with ideas, that I don't listen to them. My influencers, this is a really wonderful question. I don't know. I probably watch far too much you know, news and influenced by Rachel Maddow. You know, she to me is a really important person, but I'm not thinking, you know, music. I'm not prepared for that question. Let's have a dialogue with whoever wrote it to me, give her my email or him, and then we'll really discuss it. I need to think about that.
Okay, we're allowed to think about the influence. I mean, this is willing and unwilling influence. You know, we're also so worried right now. It's as if we are living inside a Mayan prophecy come true. So it's very challenging. Next question. More and more journalists are really putting themselves in harm's way, even during the recent protests. What are your thoughts on that, having gone through the experience with Dan losing his life?
Thank you. That's a beautiful question. Too. All these questions are so good. No story is worth your life. And that was the admonition to Dan just before he was killed, a week before he was killed, from a wonderful journalist. She said, you've got to be careful. So to every journalist out there, I would say no story is worth your life. However, you have to stand for what you believe. You have to share the story. You have to be, you know, if you're compelled to be there, you know, be smart, be wise, but tell the story. But please, no story is worth your life. So that's all I can say. I watched the Scandinavian news crew be beaten up in a certain, you know, protest. It's shocking what's going on in our country. It's like a banana republic, the way we're treating news people. And major news agencies to shoot them on site. So please beware, be careful, but do your best to tell the story. There's never been a time that is more important to tell important stories.
That's right. Tomorrow is now. We have 5 minutes and 2 more questions. You're talking a lot about strategy. Do you have a roadmap or do you respond spontaneously? How do you do both?
Do I have a roadmap or how do I respond? Sorry?
Well, if you respond to opportunity and the call of life spontaneously.
I love that question. Jan Sardi, who wrote Shine, in the original script has Dan or somebody saying, you look at your life and you see the map of your life and you see that, I'm going to cry actually, that everything was necessary along the way, that you didn't plan it. It didn't feel like it was the right way to go, that there were blockages and there were dead ends and there were mountains and valleys and hills and rifts, the Great Rift Valley, separating you from your goal. But that map of your life, it's okay. It's the way it unfolded and it's all okay. And strategy, I'm terrible on strategy. I surround myself with brilliant strategists, our CEO, Pat Chandler, Alicia, who's helping me today. Those are the strategists. I am the, a spark and the map of my life. Yeah, I'm okay with it.
We love you, Kathy.
Thank you. I think I cry on this one.
Spontaneous emotion. The emotional interaction with all of us is very, very important. We should not be cool to emotion. Last question. Many young people don't see the difference between presidential candidates. How would you convince young people to vote?
I'm speechless. Okay, I would say to those of you or them who are not seeing the difference, please educate yourself. Please go to sources that you trust. Speak to people you admire. Think about human rights, the right to choose for your body, the right to stand up for what you believe, the right to love who you want to love. Every right that we hold dear is being threatened in this election. So I would ask you to universally declare, get behind Eleanor. She knew what she was talking about. Please, please educate yourself and vote for human rights.
Well, Eleanor felt that the vote is a huge privilege in a democratic society. And democracy is still the privilege of the people. As unsatisfying as the political processes are today, let's remind ourselves that tomorrow is now, and there are alternatives. Many other countries have many different parties and different philosophies, political philosophies. It's never too late to start a different political philosophy that may grow in time, a different movement that reflects more closely the tomorrow that you want to start today. I think that is something that maybe the giants of politics of the past would counsel.
Love it.
Listen.
I hope I'm speaking to you out there.
One view or the other view. I
Yeah.
think young people if they don't recognize themselves in those views, offer alternatives. Absolutely. We'll have a movement.
I hope we're speaking to that audience, that somebody out there is going to, many of you are going to lead us to a new tomorrow with a new way of thinking and a new way of acting and a new way of being and a new way of speaking. Go for it. We're behind you. Call me.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Kathy, for everything you have given us in this hour. You've given so much. You have inspired. You have given us links of really interesting things to look at and ways for wonderful audience to get involved in creative visions. And I hope we can keep the thread going between all of us. Sure. And thank you for dedicating your life and your life goals to human rights and to empowering young people to be freedom fighters all over the world. That is truly following in Eleanor's footsteps, and we're grateful.
Thank you for letting me be noisy. I really appreciate it. Love, love. Thank you, Manuela.
Thank you. Erin, do you want to give a closing remark?
I just want to say thank you, and so inspiring. And I think it's important for people to see emotion. I think that we are all, so I want to thank you for being so open and authentically yourself, and that the journey doesn't come without pain and consequences to ourselves personally, but that you were able to, through your story, show a way forward where there didn't seem to be one. I think it's, especially in this time, sharing that will help people understand that we can, proceed. And I think that's also something that Eleanor, she suffered a lot and really struggled with her own inner demons, and was somehow always managed to land on a sort of optimistic, that people can make a difference and an impact. So she was sort of the light, and I see that, Kathy, in you as well. So I just want to thank you today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Erin. Thank you, Manuela. Lauren, thank you all.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and we will meet next month again, and you'll receive notification of our next speaker next tomorrow's webinar. Thank you, Kathy, and thank you, Erin. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye for now. Bye-bye.